What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Built by Bailey's YouTube channel. All right, so this video is going to deal with the Colorado real estate sale purchase contract and the contract dates and deadlines and how you go about consistently putting these dates and deadlines together correctly and giving yourself and your buyer or your investor enough time to get through all these due diligence scenarios and deadlines. And I know even we call them seasoned brokers and real estate agents have trouble with some of these dates and not understanding how some of these correspond and link to each other. And it's really, really important that you understand each one of these dates and deadlines and how it can actually work together and kind of say team up with some of these other deadlines as well. So when you're reviewing certain documents, which you need to learn better, and if you haven't, go check out that other video I talked about with title commitment and survey and how to read and negotiate that paperwork in general. But as far as some of these dates and deadlines are concerned, these dates and deadlines are married together on some form. And it's really important to understand, even for you seasoned realtors and agents out there, understand how these dates go together and making sure that you have them correctly lined out in the Colorado contract. All right, before we get started, make sure you guys, if you haven't, for more information, you go follow me on Instagram. It's right here. You want to make sure that you get all that information updated through the Instagram account. And you also want to make sure, as usual, you hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. If you like the videos, as always, hit that thumbs up for help on getting these videos out to more and more people. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and dig in here on the contract and the dates and deadlines in particular and how they kind of go together and understanding what all these dates and deadlines really mean. So this Word document is actually outlined to describe in detail from top to bottom the most current contract and how they're laid out in the contract. So every one of these categories is from top to bottom, just like it would be in the current Colorado purchase agreement contract. Once you get under contract and you have a mutually executed contract, meaning all parties have signed to create the contract period itself, then you've got to go ahead and drop off earnest money per what it stipulates or what's agreed to in the contract itself on the listing, whoever's dictating that. Usually it's that verbiage is in the listing itself and dictated by the seller or the seller's agent. But once that number is discussed and agreed upon, then you got to get that money turned in. Here in Colorado, you have up to 72 hours from MEC, which is mutually executed contract. Okay, that's what MEC stands for. All right, so get that turned in. A lot of times you can wire it to the title company or whoever's going to hold that in escrow. You can drop off a check, whatever it is, whatever the contract dictates as good funds and what that's allowing is how you're going to have to do that. So that's step one. Again, it's Colorado law dictates up to 72 hours from MEC. So that's 1 to 3 days. Then you're going to have to you're going to break down the next section, which is title. And again, go through that title commitment video if you haven't already to understand what you're reviewing. Okay. Some of these deadlines are going to be extended depending on what other documents are going to be related to these deadlines. And I'll explain that here in a second. Record title deadline. This is going to be up to the title company submitting this stuff to you. I generally like to go a full 2 weeks on this stuff. And I know in this day and age where everyone's gets in a hurry kind of attitude to get things done, even if you're a cash buyer or you're expecting a cash offer, understand, yes, cash can close quicker because you're removing or eliminating the underwriting process from a lender or a mortgage company, bank, whatever it is. You're removing that scenario. So yes, that does speed up the process significantly, but it doesn't mean you should be able to close in 7 to 10 days from MEC. That's dangerous. And I stress to all of you guys watching this video right now, do not make a contract for a 7-day period unless you want to get caught with your pants down on one of these items we're just going to go through right now. 14 days is about as much as you're going to want to dictate, I would say 10 at the minimum, but I say 14 is a good timeline because you want to make sure that title company themselves can actually dig up all the paperwork they need to on title record. Okay. So you want to give the title company enough time to prepare the documents you're looking to review. Very, very important, especially as they're preparing and revising their title commitments. Make sure you allow them enough time to get it to you, and then you have enough time to review. And again, if you're reviewing by yourself, understand what you're looking at. But at the same time, if you're not, giving it to a real estate lawyer is really, really worth the money, especially on bigger projects, multifamily properties, where there's maybe some more complications, or even older properties where there could be a long list of title um, issues that could come up that you want to make sure you want to get through them. And if you don't know what's going on title commitment, you want to have someone else, an expert in that field, review some of this stuff to make sure you're not missing anything. All right. So once you have that, again, a good 14 days is a solid number. You're going to have an objection period on anything that you may determine you're not going to want to deal with or your buyer's not going to deal with. That's going to be another 3 to 5 days after the deadline to receive it. So you want to give yourself a good 3 to 5 days to review this once you've received it. But again, if you're giving that buffer of a good 2 weeks of 14 days on the record title deadline, then you should have enough time to get through this stuff. Anything that's off record, same thing. You want to make sure that you're gathering that information in a timely manner. Make sure you give yourself enough time for those parties to deliver that information to you. Same thing. You want to have these two, the record title and the off record title objections, land on the same day because you're going to be reviewing them congruently. Okay. And then if there's any sort of right of first refusal, which you should have had that information before you went to your contract period, a good week is a good timeline to make sure that that party is notified. Hey, we've got a contract, someone looking to buy the property. Whoever's got the first position or the right of first refusal, give them enough time to respond, especially if there's more than just one entity involved. You want to make sure that that gets through in a timely manner. All right. So anything that's going to be in the HOA or owners association, those documents, again, HOAs can take a long time to get information to you, especially the bigger ones. A good 14 days is imperative. In here, I know it says 10 to 14 days from MEC for a termination deadline. Again, I would go another 3 to 5 from this period. So maybe 12 to 15 days is probably a better determination, especially as slow as documents are getting to us from HOAs themselves. All right, seller's disclosure, and then lead-based paint disclosure. The disclosures themselves should have already been prepared and signed ahead of time before this went to a listing by the listing agent themselves. So you don't need many days to get through this, but sometimes things get screwed up. Sometimes listing agents don't get to these things. Make sure that you actually have enough time to get through this. Again, these are all dates that I would say would be business days, unless you've dictated otherwise in the contract. 1 to 3 business days from MEC is important. I would go a full 3 days for the disclosures just to make sure everything's delivered, and you can have time to review that stuff. All right. More importantly is understanding the loan deadline. So you're most times going to have a loan on the property. Your buyer's probably not paying cash most of the time. Understanding these timelines is super, super important. So what you want to do here is make sure that this section is dialed in appropriately. And the reason being, you don't want to start doing a lot of amend extends if you're going to get delays, especially as you get closer and prepare to do underwriting. I see so many mistakes in this section themselves. And there's so many changes that have to be made once this thing is delivered to the seller, and the listing agent may miss some of these deadlines till after everything's signed, and amends have to come in, or the bank, the lender themselves may see it and say, hey, some of these deadlines are all over the map. This isn't going to make sense to us, or it's not going to work for us. We need to amend some of these deadlines. All right. New loan application. Again, this should have been happening before you put an offer in. So make sure that you've got that app in and your buyers have that app in before you present an offer. Most of the time, you're not going to be able to get the offer to the listing agent unless you've got a pre-approval letter, meaning the application has already been in. But just in case paperwork gets screwed up, give a full 3 days to this from MEC. All right. New loan termination deadline. This is the deadline to finish underwriting and get full approval with the lender. That means green lighted to close. Okay. The new loan termination deadline is the green light to close on the loan to purchase this property. This gets screwed up. This is a little bit older. I'm actually going to tell you, at least in this Colorado market right now in 2022, I would give a full 45 days to this. And then again, I'm just trying to save you guys extra paperwork and a lot of amend extends and maybe some turmoil between buyers and sellers. You want to get this done faster than that, but I'm telling you right now, things are just going to start moving slower. From 45 days from MEC is probably your best bet on this section. Buyer's credit information. Again, the loan app can go out or be signed and completed and pre-approved. They're going to do a digger dig. They're going to do a deeper dig on the buyer's credit as they progress through to get to underwriting. You're going to keep checking on your buyer to make sure they're not doing anything stupid like buying new cars, opening more credit cards, or running up credit card debt. Anything that could change the credit information or the LTV, the loan to value of the buyer themselves, the lender's going to keep checking on it. But the credit information deadline, the initial one, needs to be done once app is done as well. So give a full 10 days to this from MEC. Disapproval of that, you want to go another 3 to 5 days out. So a good full 2 weeks from MEC, just in case something else comes up and your buyers have done something stupid. You can get out of this contract with them, get that cleaned up, and then go make another offer or come back to the same property if it's still available. Good luck. Anyway, existing loan deadlines and existing loan termination deadlines. Again, this is what would be if you're doing an assumption on some sort of agreement with the contract. You're assuming the current loan on the property. This is all information, and these sections right here have to do with the assumption themselves. It's fairly rare these days to do that. But again, same kind of time period as you would have for the credit information and for kind of the disapproval of credit information as well. You want to have that deadline. It's going to be pretty quick. It's going to either be the lender's got this a loan and they see the pre-approval. They may say, yes, I'll take that on as the assumption and let them have it, or no. And then the transfer deadline, meaning they're going to swap information and add the new buyer to the existing loan on this property. I would go another 30 to 45 days. I think 35 to 40 days is fairly safe at this point. I know it says 21 to 28 here, but I would go 35 to 40 days on that transfer of the assumption of the loan. Seller or private financing, yes, these do come in a little bit quicker ahead of most banks and lenders, but I'd give it a full 30 days because there's still a lot of paperwork and more red tape that we're dealing with these days. All right, those all line up. Then you're going to move into the appraisal stuff. Okay, appraisals right now, especially, I'm seeing the most mistakes made. And I think most agents are not understanding what's going on in this market. And when we talk about supply chains and lack of employment and what's happening in these markets and what's happening in the economy in general, appraisals are no different. There is a lack of appraisers out there. And the ones that are out there are busy because the real estate market's crazy still. And these appraisers are backed up. So the old standard of, and these need to be updated. I know it says 18, 21 days here. You're going to have to go further out than that. I would give it a full 4 weeks, honestly. 28 days right now. And hopefully you get in before then. But I've seen so many times where amend extends have come in over and over again because the appraiser keeps pushing that deadline back because they can't get out to the property. Luckily, with some of the recent purchases I've made, I haven't had that issue. It's been about 15 to 18 days-ish from MEC. But again, save yourself some headaches and paperwork, push it out. So a good 3 to 4 weeks in here is really, really the best way to go. And then give yourself another 2 days and the underwriting team another 2 to 3 days to make sure if the appraisal doesn't come in where it's supposed to be, what the process is going to be moving forward. Are they going to walk? Are they going to do appraisal gap and pay ahead and above? What's the scenario? Some of that as is dictated in the contract itself, but give yourself a few days from that period to decide. Okay. Now, here's the next mistake I see. Survey. Now, I'm talking about ILC or survey. Now, ILC is an improvement location certificate. It is not a full survey. It's most times you're going to get an ALTA survey, but it's not even that. It's not even an ALTA survey. It may be done by an ALTA certified surveyor, but an ILC is basically just reviewing documents that have already been drawn up, drafted, whatever it is, and saying, yeah, nothing's changed that we as the surveyor can see. The ILC can be done in their office. They're not going to come out to the property. They're not going to measure and check for pins and boundary markers. They're just going to verify information hasn't changed since the last one most of the time. I would say you're probably getting more like 60-40 on what the bank is going to require as opposed to ILC or survey. But either way, again, one, surveyors are just as backed up, if not more, than appraisers. And you're also going to review the survey or the ILC in conjunction with your title commitment and your record title. Okay. So these dates need to be the same for reception and objection deadlines as your title dates. Okay. If you're going to be 14 days out on these, then you need to be out 14 days on these. So here's the caveat. I know some of these dates are a little bit different. Here's the caveat with this. If surveyors are backed up, and again, this is a phone call or several phone calls to make to surveyors, the one of your choice, whoever it is, to figure out when they can actually come out and do the survey. And I always recommend doing a full survey. I know it's a lot more money, but it's really imperative that you get everything correctly dialed in. You're going to get more information from a survey than an ILC, especially when you go into some of the language and things that have been pulled up on easements and so forth through the title commitment from the title company. These dates, again, should be congruent with these dates. And at the same time, if the surveyor is backed up, then you're going to need to bump out the record title deadlines as well. So if that surveyor can't get to it for 3 weeks, then those dates with record title and objections need to be out the same time, that same 3 weeks. Okay. The survey and title need to be reviewed congruently. So you can't really review one without the other. You can start on one, but you don't want to finish reviewing and doing your due diligence on these things until you have both in hand, because there's lots of cross-referencing happening between the survey and the record title. Okay. Inspections, same deal right now. Know your lead time with inspectors. Okay. Yes, I know we all want to get that inspection done in the first week to week and a half. It's not really that possible right now. I'm not saying in every case, but in most circumstances, you're looking at about a 3-week lead time for inspectors. Make sure that's in there. Again, a lot of this stuff in here with the due diligence documents should be in line with your survey. Try and keep this as congruent as possible so your last deadlines are basically landing with the furthest pulled out date, which usually is going to be the survey and maybe the appraisal. Okay. So make sure these dates land around the same time. Due diligence documents, exactly the same. The delivery, you want to have those as fast as possible. Give about a good 10 days to the due diligence documents to be delivered, but have most of those items landing with your furthest out dates at that point. That way you can wrap everything else up at the same time before you finish underwriting and move to closing. The only thing I would suggest that, will be different on that end would be down here with the lead-based paint termination deadline. You're going to have a lead-based paint disclosure if it's a house built before 1976. A lot of times you're going to have a little lead-based paint disclosure anyway. That's fine. If you have an issue or if the inspector brings up a potential, hey, I think this could be lead based on the date, age, whatever it is, sometimes you even have signs, you're going to want to go and do a lead test. Okay. So you may have to schedule a hygienist to come out and do a lead test on the paint to verify that. That's going to take longer. You may or may not have to do an amend extend because of that. So again, you could do this and determine it pretty quickly, but if you're waiting on other deadlines, why have these all over the map? The more limited your deadlines are, the better. Just keep it as congruent as possible is kind of the key here. Okay. So now that you've got all these things wrapped up, You understand the link between survey, record title, loan information, appraisals, all that stuff's in here. Now you're going to have your closing dates and possession dates and times. I actually see a lot of mistakes made here as well. So, closing date, a lot of times agents will take the loan termination deadline and they'll say, all right, well, if the lender told me it's going to be 30 days, then we can close in 30 days. You can't do that because paperwork has to be delivered. We've got to get settlement statements out. We got to review settlement statements. There's always going to be a hiccup, especially if your closing is landing on a Thursday or Friday. By the way, real quick, try not to do closings on Fridays. Mondays are the second worst. Okay. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday gives you a buffer on either end in case something gets screwed up. Fridays, if something gets screwed up, you got to wait a whole weekend before you can get back in there. Mondays is obviously a little bit better because you have the rest of the week, but it's coming in from the weekend where there could be a mistake and no one's doing work on the weekends in the banking industry or in the title industry. No offense to people that I know in those industries, but you're not. So they'll come in, they'll show up at 9 o'clock and they'll review things one more time and go, oops, sorry, we got delayed closing. And now your whole day is shot because you've got everything else scheduled. Okay. So try and do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. But going back to the closing date, give yourself another 3 or 4 days from the loan termination deadline. This is your last deadline. Okay. So if it's 30 days, then make it 35 days for closing. If it's 45 days, make it 50 days before you can close. I know those numbers sound so far out, but right now it's so important. You can always close ahead of time. If things are done early, you can go ahead and contact the title company and the seller and say, hey, we're ready to go. Bump up the closing. Don't go the other way and keep amending, extending, and pushing it out. That's where you start running into more problems. All right, possession date. Now, understand this. If it's an occupied home, think about this. Until this deadline is closed, until your last deadline is closed and your money goes hard, as we say, meaning you've surpassed all of your deadlines, and only thing that's going to happen is you're going to not close because you just walk away from the actual contract itself, which means you're going to forego your earnest money, or worse, it could be specific performance depending on the contract and how it's laid out. The person living here, the seller that's living in the home, isn't going to be able to move out the day of closing. I know there's a lot of this that's happening. People are moving out ahead of time, kind of risky because what if you don't close? You've moved out and now you've got a vacant house you may have to move back into. Who knows? But give the seller a couple days after closing to get done. I like to be generous and say 3 days. They may tell you it's not necessary, but if you give them a full 3 days, knowing because they're now their money's hard, we're going to close, everything's committed, paperwork's ready to go. Now they have a 3-day buffer once you've closed to get out. But you can always ask that ahead of time. But if it's an occupied property, give them an extra 3 days. Be courteous of your humans, okay? Possession time, same thing. Give them till the end of the day, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., whatever it is. Give them till the end of that day. If it's not an occupied home, same thing though. You can have your possession date and your closing date be the same if it's an unoccupied home. But let's go at the end of the day. That way, if closing gets pushed back, you're not dealing with the middle of the day thing. Don't put 12 p.m. as a possession time. That's just stupid. It's really silly. Sorry. Make it 5, 6 p.m. Well, no, whatever close of business could be for you guys. Acceptance deadline and acceptance deadline date and time. Okay, so this is giving the time for the seller and the seller's agent to review the contract you've presented with all these nicely organized dates now and everything else that's in here that you've written up in a perfect contract, right? Okay, these two categories right here, you want to give 48 hours. I know sometimes we got to hurry and do 24. Now, it's understanding the market and understanding the specific situation as to when you go ahead and give a same day response time or a 24-hour turnaround period time. Typically 48 hours is pretty nice. I just put midnight in here anymore because 6 p.m., 7 p.m., something happens. The wife can't get a hold of the husband, vice versa, whatever, or they can't sit down and get to the listing agent's comments on the contract you've presented, whatever it is. If it's that day, go until midnight. That way, if something happens with the scanner or the DocuSign or the e-contracts, whatever it is, they have time to correct it, and you're not doing an amend, extend, or rewriting a contract. Again, forego doing too much paperwork. Work smart, not hard. Okay. So deadline time 12 a.m. Okay, or 11:59 p.m. technically would be correct. all those dates and deadlines in a nutshell. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I know some of those can fluctuate depending on the specific situation, but most of the time that rule will be in place. If you want a copy of that, I can get you guys one. Just hit me up in the comments below or DM me on Instagram and I can fire one of those off to you guys as reference. It certainly does help understanding where you should be and understanding how those different dates and deadlines kind of marry to each other and why you have certain deadlines and why a lot of those can actually be pushed further back than most agents might think. So hopefully that helps. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Again, if you haven't, make sure you guys hit the thumbs up. Make sure you guys follow me on Instagram. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell for notifications. Appreciate everybody. Until next time, keep building.